Shana Tova. As I begin this morning, I want to acknowledge that the last 48 hours has been crazy and a lot has changed. We sit here in California celebrating together as Jews, and in Israel, our friends and family are gathering together, ensuring that they are near bomb shelters. 2 days ago, Debbie and I sat with the son of a friend of ours from Jerusalem who had just finished 7 months of fighting in Gaza. He was here on the West Coast trying to clear his mind and cope with what he had just been through. And instead, we sat together as we watched Iranian missiles fall on Israel, and he worried about his family and friends, wondering if he was going to be called back and would need to cut his trip short. So before I share with you my thoughts that I've been collecting and writing over these past few months, let's just take a moment of silence to reflect on what's happening in Israel and send them all the strength and love that we can. Over these past few weeks, I have heard in approximately equal quantities the following words. Wow, Rabbi, did this year go by quickly? I cannot believe that we're here together again. It seems like we were just here. And also, wow, Rabbi, this last year has been the longest of my life. I thought it would never end, and to be honest, I'm not sure it has. How fascinating is it that the very same 525,600 minutes, to quote Rent, the well-known musical, can be perceived by each of us so differently? How has this last year been for you? For me, it's been unlike anything I've ever experienced. I've felt horror and terror, joy and hope, confusion and outrage in more ways than I could have ever imagined possible for a single human being. Time fluctuated so wildly that somehow I felt so many of these emotions simultaneously. We tend to prefer our emotions categorized in nice little packages. Isn't that what our tradition teaches us? To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a time and a place for everything. A time to be sad and concerned, a time to be joyful and hopeful. But rarely do we feel all of these disparate emotions all at the same time. Maybe there's a different way to understand that verse from Kohelet. It's clear that the author is keenly aware of the ebb and flow of time, but each season brings its own rhythm, a unique sense of time that varies depending on what's happening in our lives. Perhaps the purpose of this ancient wisdom is to help us recognize that time is not experienced uniformly. In joyful moments, time may seem to fly by as we're caught up in the fullness of life. Yet in times of waiting, suffering, or anxiety, time may drag, with each minute feeling like an hour. Our tradition reminds us that this is part of the human experience, and that the flow of time reflects not only the external world, but our internal one as well. This past year, we have certainly felt time screech to a near halt. At Kol Nidre, I will be speaking about those long and lonely moments that we have felt and shared this year. But today I want to focus on those occasions when time moves more quickly. I want to make sure that we remember why we are here on this Rosh Hashanah. In the rush of our daily routines, it's easy to let time slip by without much thought. But Rosh Hashanah calls on us to pause and to consider whether we are truly living each day with purpose and meaning. Are we simply adding days to our life, or are we actually adding life to our days? That's our challenge as we begin this new year. Are we just going to count the days until the next year or the next, or are we committing to ensuring that no matter how many moments we have, they're going to be meaningful and worth the time? To help us with this, we're going to look at 3 biblical texts this morning to guide us. You know, we in San Diego, we're lucky to have such a rich diversity of Jewish cultures to draw on. Not only do we have the European Ashkenazi population within our community, but we have Sephardi Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Latin American Jews, South African Jews, and they all bring their customs to enrich the larger Beth and San Diego community. One of the earliest South African customs that I was exposed to was the tradition to wish long life at a funeral or at a shiva home. This last year, I read a piece by Rabbi Levi Avtson from the Linksfield Shul in Johannesburg titled, "A Long Life is Only the Beginning of the Blessing." What does it mean to wish someone a long life? And even more importantly, what does it mean to have a long life? Is it a matter of years, memories, experiences? Is it not possible that someone who lived into their 90s feels like their life was too short to accomplish everything that they wanted, while someone passing away in their 40s feels like they've lived a full, long, and productive life? The vagaries of time wreak havoc with our ability to define our lives in that way, and yet that's what we all wish for. That's the blessing, long life. The first biblical text helps us to understand. Genesis 24:1 reads, "Va'Avraham zaken ba bayamim, va'Adonai berach et Avraham bakol." Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and Adonai blessed Avraham in all things. Rabbi Avtson correctly asks, the obvious question is the redundancy in the statement. If one is old, does it not imply advanced in years? Why the repetition? And given that our tradition holds that nothing in the Torah is superfluous, there must be a reason for this doubling of what appears to be saying the same thing. He astutely divides our years into 2 categories. He calls them passport years and impact years. And it's quite possible, he says, to have a long life in one and a short life in the other. Avraham was blessed in all things because he understood the importance of both. Yes, he lived a long life. Our tradition tells us he lived to the age of 175. It's a pretty impressive thing to show on your passport. But even more importantly, the impact he had in each of those years increased the scope of his life exponentially. And so our first biblical source teaches us a fundamental truth. Time is what we make of it. And our purpose on this earth, as well as this season, is to fill our passport years with as many impact years as we can. The second text I want to think about is one that comes from the book of Psalms, Psalm 90 to be exact. Many of us have heard these words at funerals or Yizkor, but they're equally powerful and poignant in other times in our life. Limnot yameinu ken hoda, v'navi levav chokhmah. Teach us to count our days rightly, that we may attain a heart of wisdom. There are so many questions I have for this text. What does it mean to count our days? How do we do it rightly? What is a heart of wisdom, and why do we want that rather than a heart of joy or a heart of fulfillment? We can start our understanding of this text from where we left off on the last one, namely, do we count our days or do we make them count? But there's more to it than that. This text takes us a step further. What if we truly could count our days? What if we knew what that number was? How would we change the way we lived? I would venture to say that if we were sure of our expiration date, we would likely live differently. Maybe some of us would spend more time on the things we deem more important. Maybe some would say, life is too short and I'm not going to sacrifice a minute of it doing things that don't make me happy. There are many options, but suffice it to say that we would live differently than we do now, knowing the reality that we just don't know how many days we have. One of the greatest dangers in life is falling into a routine where the days blur into one another, where we go through the motions without truly seeing the world around us. Maybe that's what it means to fill our life with days, not simply existing, rather truly living. Many of us have read the incredible work by Mitch Albom, Tuesdays with Morrie, and if you have not, I highly recommend it. Morrie was special for a lot of reasons, but one of the most important was he knew when he was going to die. Maybe not the exact date, but he knew well enough how much time he had left. He was able to number his days, and it did indeed give him a great deal of wisdom. What was the message that Morrie imparted to Albom 2 weeks before he died? Forgive yourself before you die. Then forgive others. All of the things we should have done, you can't get stuck on the regrets of what should have happened. That doesn't help you where you get to where I am. I always wished I had done more with my work. I had written more books. I used to beat myself up over it. Now I see it never did any good. Make peace. You need to make peace with yourself and everyone around you. You see, when we're able to number our days, we gain the wisdom of realizing that we will never be able to do and achieve everything. We are finite, and our time here on earth is finite. Ultimately, what Psalm 90 teaches us is that time is a gift, and a limited one at that. And if we're to fill our days, let it be with things that make us who we are, finding meaning in the relationships we have, the friends we care about, the community to which we belong. The final text of the three comes from the book of Deuteronomy. Ha'edoti bachem hayom et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz hachayim ve'mavet natati lefanecha habracha ve'haklala uvacharta b'chayim. I call on heaven and earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life. Choose life. Is that not obvious? Why would we choose otherwise? and yet so often we do. We know full well that the food we eat these days isn't so good for us and isn't going to provide us with a long and healthy life, but we eat it anyway. We ignore the advice of our physicians, we smoke, we use substances that tear away at the very cells of our body, and at least initially, it's by choice. Now, I know that's clearly not what the Torah is talking about, but it proves that we do not automatically choose life. I think we can agree, however, that our text is not just teaching us about a biological or physical choice, but a spiritual and moral commitment. In Jewish tradition, life is more than mere existence. It's about making meaningful and purposeful choices. We arrive at this season understanding that our life is filled with options and paths that we can take. This is our chance to watch, think, and select those choices that are best for us in multiple aspects of our lives. So what does it mean to choose life? In relationships, choosing life means nurturing love, forgiveness, connection with others. In community, it means supporting and uplifting those around us, especially during these difficult times in which we live. It means engaging in acts of tzedakah and justice. In personal growth, choosing life means seeking learning, self-reflection, spiritual development. When we don't choose life, we are in effect choosing death. Maybe not the physical ending of our existence, but perhaps a spiritual or a moral existence, our relationships or our connection with our community. In these poor choices, something valuable and important dies. Shortly, we will be reciting the Unetana Tokef prayer in Musaf. We ask who will live and who will die, who will live a long life, and who will come to an untimely end. Perhaps Rabbi Amnon of Mainz, who is thought to have written this prayer, was on to something a little bit grander than merely a list of what might happen to us. Often, we look at this piyut as defining the power of God. We are but creations, and God is the judge. But in reality, it's a prayer that reminds us of our power and the power of our choices. That's why it ends with what we can do. Uteshuva, utefila, utzedakah. Repentance, prayer, and tzedakah. These acts have potency. Our choices have potency. And therefore, we can choose life. Thus, we find these three biblical texts have revealed a path forward for us. First, we understand that time is fluid, and it depends on us to determine how it flows. Our days could be long, our days could be short, but our days flow based on our mindset. Second, when we recognize that our time on this earth is limited, it brings forward an urgency to make the most out of the time we have, to count our days and achieve the wisdom. And finally, we reaffirm that while there may be much that happens to us in the world which is out of our control, ultimately our life is ours, and we must choose to live it. So how do we do it? How do we fill our days with life? Let's begin with what many of us already do at the New Year's, whether Jewish or secular. We set our intentions. We make resolutions. Or in the Hebrew phrase, lekaven et libenu, we direct our hearts towards the choices we know will fill our days with meaning and purpose. Label those things that bring meaning and those things that do not. If you've not yet done so, take a moment during the silent Amidah that will follow and set your intentions for this new year. Think and reflect. What small daily actions can you take to ensure that each day is lived with purpose and meaning? This is where I think Judaism really got it right. Ritual and rhythms aid us in this pursuit. Consider setting aside time each day for yourself, whether it's studying Torah, reading a book, or simply taking a moment for quiet reflection. These practices help us stay connected with what matters most. We also fill our days with life when we do something that makes a difference. Consider the story of a man who every day walked the same path to work, ate the same lunch, returned home to watch the same television programs. His life was full of days, but each day was empty of life. Or the woman who, after working in the same job for 20 years, couldn't remember a single year that stood out. Every day felt the same. Yes, she was filling her life with days, but when asked about a meaningful experience or personal growth, she struggled to find anything to share. When we make a difference, our days are different, even if we're performing the same actions. As Jews, we are charged with engaging with life. That means being fully present in our daily experiences. It requires each of us to see each day as an opportunity to connect with the world around us, with people, with nature, with our own spiritual growth. In Judaism, we are called on to engage deeply with life through actions that infuse meaning into our daily routines. Whether it's through helping a neighbor, learning Torah, spending time with family, these actions transform ordinary moments into opportunities for purpose. By engaging in life, we're not simply filling our time, but we're enriching it and ourselves. And when we do so, we open ourselves to life's beauty and complexity. As I've taught many times before, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel spoke of radical amazement, the ability to find awe in the everyday. When we approach life with this mindset, even mundane tasks can become moments of wonder. This active participation in life leads to a sense of purpose and fulfillment, ensuring that each moment, no matter how small, is lived with meaning. But finally, engaging in life encourages us to actually use the life we've been given and make it count. Once the Maggid of Mezrich told a story of a poor man who spent all of his life collecting money so that he could buy an expensive suit. Finally, after obtaining it, the man admired it on the hanger for so long, he never wore it. This year, let's commit to wearing the suits that we have so long admired and kept on a hanger. Even in the most difficult of times, my friends, we still have the ability to bring meaning and purpose to our life. We see this so clearly in Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote that in addition to being a professor, I am a survivor of 4 concentration camps. As such, I also bear witness to the unexpected extent to which man is capable of defying and braving even the worst conditions conceivable. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, the freedom to choose one's own way. In Auschwitz, he continues, everyone thought of suicide. Those who indeed threw themselves on the electrified fence asked, "What do I expect from life?" Since the honest answer was nothing, they had no reason not to despair. But those who resisted asked and said, "What did life expect from me?" They felt themselves questioned by life, and they learned that they could respond with right action and beauty even amidst brutality and ugliness. They chose life. They chose to make whatever days they had count. You know, it's interesting to note that the friend's son with whom I started this talk, his name is El Chai. It literally means God of life. What began as a crazy and stressful moment in our lives, suddenly getting a guest 2 days before Rosh Hashanah, and yes, it was very Israeli of him calling while he was on the way down to San Diego. What began with stress and concern ended with the God of life being in our home. It brought purpose, meaning. It made a difference for him and made a difference for us in a senseless and very scary moment. And so today, as we face another new year, with all of the challenges that it is sure to bring, we do so with our hearts open to filling each day and each moment of 5785 with life. Let's imagine God telling us, "Dear human, I created you, I manufactured you with a hunger for more. Deep inside you, I injected a soul, a piece of divinity. I formed you in my image. But you will always have this niggling feeling that there's more to this life. Believe me when I tell you, it's yours. Take it, love it, learn it, live it." Shana Tova.